In today's video, I'm going to show you what is possible using just Lightroom Mobile when editing car photography. We're going to take this raw photo and turn it into this edited photo using just our iPad. Huge shout out to Ryan Lang for submitting this photo. I'll put his Instagram account right here so you guys can go check him out. Thank you for submitting this photo. I'm going to put up his edits here, and I'm actually going to take a bit of a different direction. As you can see, he's got a bit more warm tones here. I'm going to go for a bit more of the cool, moody tones. One quick little caveat here before we get into it. Some of the features that I'm going to be using are a paid part of Lightroom. So when it comes to the exposure and colors and those kinds of things, you can do all of that for free. But once we get into the masking, you will need to pay the Adobe subscription service, which I'll put the price up here for how much that is. So this is a beautifully captured photo. And if you can see here in the bottom right-hand corner, this is the settings that he used. He used a shutter speed of 1/40 of a second, an aperture of 3.5, and an ISO of 400. And it looks like he's using a Sony, so we shouldn't have too many issues with any noise. So awesome settings. This guy knows what he's doing with his camera, which is fantastic. Now, the first thing I want to do here is I want to check how much dynamic range we have in this photo. This is a raw photo, just so you guys know. So we are working with a lot of details. We can see in the sky, we have all the details there. And if we up our exposure, we have a lot of details in the car as well. Now, as I said, I want to go for a bit more of a moody edit here. So I'm going to drop the exposure. I'm going to bring the highlights down because I want to get as much detail in that sky as I possibly can. Bring up the shadows a little bit because I want to see in the details here. I want to get as much details back in kind of these dark areas without going too crazy. Now, one thing I love to do is while you're dragging this, you can actually tap and hold, and then you can start to see what's being overexposed. So that's just with the whites, and likewise with the blacks. If you start dragging, then tap and hold, you can start to see what kind of details you're crushing there as well. So some people say you can't do this in the unpaid version, but I do recommend make sure you drag it first, then press, and that should fix the issues. Maybe not, we'll see. But from here, I'm just gonna eyeball it to get a good level of contrast there without losing too many details in the dark areas. I don't wanna overexpose those whites either, but I think we're actually gonna kind of leave that there. Now that we've got our light sorted out, we're using as much dynamic range as we can, and I'm gonna come into the curves tool, which is this little guy up here, and we're gonna make sure to save that top portion of light. Again, I want that moody photo, so I'm gonna bring the highlights down like this. And cars tend to land in the midtones, so I'm gonna bring the midtones back up here to make sure we're keeping the details in there. And then on the bottom left, we're gonna add back in that contrast to taste. Now, if you guys like that faded look, this is where you can drag the bottom half here, and you can see it fades out all the blacks. Now, I don't think I'm gonna do that for this particular photo, but I'm gonna try and bring back some of the contrast here. And that looks pretty good. Maybe the car's popping a little too much for the moody look, so we're gonna bring that back down, and that looks okay to me. So we're gonna exit the curves there. Now we're gonna go into our colors panel here. So I am going to bring down the saturation as I'm going for more of that moody look here, and maybe just tap the vibrance a bit, but I think we're gonna leave that. Now, if we go into our color mix, this is where you can mess with the colors specifically. Now, I'm seeing a lot of blues in the sky, and obviously the car is orange. So what I like about this photo is that there's already good color contrast, and that the car naturally pops out of the image. So we don't have to do too much work to make it stick out of, I don't know, a background that isn't very good for this photo, but this is already a naturally great photo for that. But I'm gonna go into the blues, and I'm going to actually bring the luminance down to see if we can bring back some more of the details in the background there. And you can see that that is doing a lot to give us some details back. Let's see what we do if we pop the saturation a bit, because I want that color contrast. That looks pretty good. Now, if we go to the oranges, let's see if we bump the luminance here. It almost makes the car stick out too much, so I might not touch that yet because we're gonna do some masking later on that's gonna help that car stand out. That's all we're gonna do for the color mix for now. So we're gonna tap out of that and into the color grading. Now, I have a preset that I like to use for this. I've already got it built into my Lightroom. So it's called the Classic Balance. What that does for me is it uses my preset for color grading where I have 35 in the highlights and 220 in the shadows, both to a saturation of 10. And then that way, all I have to do is come to the balance and pick whether or not I want the warmer side of the photo or the cooler side of the photo. So we're gonna actually drag that down to the cooler side of the photo there. So we're making it more that moody blue tone. And again, I'll show you here in the shadows, I've got 220 and saturation of 10 in the shadows. And in my highlights, we have 35 and 10 in the saturation there. And in the midtones, I'm just doing a very mild luminance pop. Again, that just helps bring a little bit more details out in the car. Nothing crazy there. All right, so that is our color panel. Let's go down into the effects panel and see what we want to do in here. Now, some people like to add clarity. I personally don't use a lot of that. I might dehaze this as we have a pretty hazy background, and this could add a nice level of contrast in there. Now, one thing I've been loving doing is adding a little bit of grain in these digital photos to take away a little bit of that edge. So I'm not going to do a crazy amount of this, but I might bring it up to 10 or 20. And this is a really negligible thing, but it just takes away some of that digital look that I'm personally not preferring right now. This is totally up to you. I don't go heavy into the grain, but I like just taking away that digital edge. The next tab we're gonna go into here is the details tab. Now, as you can see, when you take a raw photo, it naturally has a sharpening of 40. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this masking tab and I'm gonna drag it up. Now, again, if you hold on the screen after you've started dragging, you can start seeing what it's sharpening. If masking is all the way to the left, you're naturally sharpening everything. So I like to drag this to the right and just sharpen the edges of the car or any of the details in the photo that you like. So everything that's white here is being sharpened. Everything that's black is no longer being sharpened. So if you've got a noisy image, this also helps a lot to take away the sharpening on some of that noise. So I think that's a good location there. So masking 74. And what I love about that is it just kind of softens things up on the car here. Oh, when you zoom in, you can really see the effect of that grain on the car. So that looks pretty cool, actually. All right, and I leave everything else. If it was a noisy photo, this is where we would do noise reduction. Optics, we're gonna remove chromatic aberration. We've already got enable lens correction there, and we're not gonna touch geometry. So this is where we get into the masking portion. So if you aren't paying for that premium subscription, then this is where you're gonna lose out on some of these details. And I'm not sponsored by Adobe, but this is really the only thing that I pay for is the Lightroom and Photoshop features, so I can have it on my computer and my mobile devices. Now, as we go into the masking panel here, it's this little circle on the right side. And as you go in, you're gonna tap plus here, and we're gonna add a linear gradient. Now we're gonna just drag this from the bottom up towards around the mid level of the car. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna come down here to this plus minus button, and we're gonna subtract from the mask. We're gonna hit select subject. And what this is doing is it's taking away the subject from the mask. So when we come up here and we actually bring the exposure down, it's not going to be bringing the exposure down on our subject. So this way we can drag this up over and you can see that the car is not being affected at all. And that's kind of what we want. So we're just going to bring that up and just kind of do this to taste. You do want to be careful with this not to overcook it because then it doesn't look too natural, but we just want to bring the exposure down just a touch, bringing our eyes drawn towards the car. The next mask we're going to add here is we're going to hit select subject. Now, what you will notice some limitations here on the mobile version versus the classic version is that up in the light panel here, we would actually have the ability to adjust curves. So I tend to actually like using the curves to adjust exposure on my car, but we'll work with the tools that we've got inside here. So we're actually gonna bring the highlights down a touch. We're gonna bring the shadows up a little bit, whites up just a touch, and blacks down just a little. And what we're gonna do here later is we're actually gonna brush in some of the details we want. Add contrast. And there we go. So we're actually just helping that car pop out just a little bit. If you wanted to, you could even add a little bit of saturation here to make the car really stand out. And if you add this, plus you go into your color panel, you could bring down the saturation on the rest of the image and then really make your car pop out using that mask if you want. These are just tools you guys have access to, which is a lot of fun. What I maybe would do more to this photo is add one more linear gradient from the top down, make that sky just a touch more moody. But for now, it's pretty darn good, and I think we're gonna leave it as just kind of a clean image. The last thing we're gonna do here, add a brush, and we are going to brush in some of these details on the car. Just gonna touch the wheel there, make the brush size a little smaller. And we're gonna add some exposure here, up the contrast. And then from here, we're just gonna move in on some of these details and just brush these in. Again, do this to taste. And as you can see, actually some of it is not good, and I'm kind of going over some bits that I don't want to. So be really careful with this. Just get the bits that you do want to bring exposure back to. You can do this with your finger. I know I'm doing it with an Apple pencil or whatever, but you don't need to do that. We're just gonna bring light to the light parts. So this process is called dodging and burning. We're adding light to the places that we wanna see a little bit more of. And then if you wanted to add another mask, you could actually add some darker areas to it. But here, we're just trying to add a little bit of brightness onto some of the details that we want to see here. And you can see he used a CPL filter, so we can see into the car. We can add a couple details there. Honestly, it's such a well captured photo. This guy absolutely slayed it. Now, this is something you need to be really careful of when you're adding brushes in Lightroom, is not to have this kind of hazy bit around the car. So you can see I kind of overcooked that there. So I'm gonna come back in and just take that away, because that is amateur hour for sure. Now that we have the image moody and it's looking really good, the last thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna go clean up some of the image, and we're just gonna pop back here to where the sign is, and we're just gonna remove that sign, bring the size down a little bit, and hopefully the AI is actually gonna do a pretty good job of recognizing that and removing the sign, adding some postage, we'll see. Yeah, does a fantastic job. Now, there is the finished photo. Thank you so much to Ryan Lang for submitting this photo and allowing me to edit it. You captured this beautifully, and I hope that you guys learned something about how to edit using just your mobile device, whether it's your iPad or your iPhone. Now, my understanding, if you're an Android user, there might be some features that you also don't have access to. I apologize, I'm not an Android user. If you guys are, let me know down in the comments below. Help your fellow car creative out, and let me know what you guys learned from this down in the comments. If you guys like this video, you might like that one there too. You could consider subscribing to the channel, and I do hope that I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.